Have you ever wondered why some people effortlessly draw respect while others struggle just to be heard? Imagine stepping into any room and instantly capturing attention, not by shouting louder or boasting more, but by mastering a secret ingredient in the art of conversation. In today's video, I'm revealing the hidden game changer that transforms ordinary talk into powerful communication, whether you're navigating workplace politics, strengthening family bonds, or even handling social gatherings. Stick around to discover the pivotal technique that top communicators use but rarely share openly. And hey, if you appreciate content packed with practical life wisdom, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Have you ever noticed how certain individuals can walk into a bustling room, say only a few words, and somehow command the undivided attention of everyone present? It's almost as if they carry an aura that compels you to listen, whereas others, despite their best efforts, raising their voice, using flashy gestures, or projecting knowledge, find themselves overshadowed and overlooked. What's the real difference between these two extremes? Contrary to popular belief, it isn't about how loud, smart, or experienced you are. Instead, it stems from how you speak and the subtle way in which you carry yourself when delivering a message. In other words, you don't earn respect simply by shouting the loudest facts or figures. You earn it by communicating in a manner that resonates with people. While some of these methods might make you nod in agreement, others can create discomfort because they challenge deeply ingrained habits. But no matter how you feel initially, integrating these approaches into your speech can revolutionize the way you're perceived in both personal and professional settings. This conversation about communication goes beyond casual chit-chat or public speaking tips. It dives into the heart of what makes us feel worthy of attention and respect. Respect is such an interesting concept because it's not always about being perfect. Rather, it's about presenting yourself in a way that makes people believe your words matter. Whether you're giving a formal presentation in the office, talking with friends and family, or simply participating in a heated online discussion, the manner in which you choose to articulate your thoughts can elevate you from a background voice to someone who truly commands the room. Part of this is influenced by self-awareness. Are we aware of the signals we send when we speak? Are we apologizing excessively, oversharing, or filling every silence with fluff? Or do we pause at the right moments, set boundaries when necessary, and speak with a purpose that's immediately clear? In everyday life, it's easy to slip into patterns that undermine our own worth. We may say, "I'm sorry" at the drop of a hat, effectively telling others we don't deserve to be there. We may allow people to walk all over us because we haven't learned how to define and defend our boundaries. We might rush through our words to fill awkward silences, never pausing to see if our audience actually understands us or wants to respond. We could resort to gossip or jokes at our own expense simply to feel included, only to find these habits slowly erode our personal credibility. The truth is, each seemingly small element of how we communicate contributes to whether we gain respect or lose it. This first part of the article will explore the significance of dropping the reflexive "I'm sorry" and the importance of setting clear boundaries. These strategies may seem straightforward, but they tap into deeper beliefs about our self-worth, identity, and place in the social hierarchy. By understanding why we do these things, we gain the power to change them. It's about more than just advice. It's about shifting our entire relationship with ourselves and subsequently how others perceive us. Let's jump in and discover how shifting our communication style can spark a positive transformation, one that not only enriches our own self-assurance, but also shapes how the world responds. Before we dissect how to sound more confident, let's address the philosophical underpinnings of respect. Respect, at its core, arises when we acknowledge the inherent dignity in ourselves and others. It's often spoken of in lofty terms: give respect to get respect. But what does this actually look like in the real world? One of the most insightful concepts here is the idea that you can't command respect from anyone if you don't first respect yourself. This isn't about narcissism or an inflated ego. It's about recognizing your own right to speak and occupy space. Think back to a time when you encountered someone who spoke with self-assurance and clarity, even if you disagreed with their viewpoint. You might have found yourself listening closely to them, if only to understand why they were so composed. Their energy exuded a sense of self-trust, and that's a key element we're aiming to cultivate in our own speech patterns. However, self-trust doesn't spontaneously appear overnight. It's typically built on the bedrock of personal experiences, moments of self-reflection, and even the occasional misstep that teaches valuable lessons. In this sense, your manner of speaking is like a mirror, reflecting what you think about yourself. If you're constantly apologizing or hesitating to make your point, you're essentially telegraphing uncertainty and asking for permission to exist. That's not an exaggeration. When you say, "I'm sorry," every time you move through a crowded hallway or express a contrasting opinion, you're subtly sending the message that you are an inconvenience or an afterthought. Over time, people will unconsciously adopt this view of you, making it difficult for them to treat you as someone whose words deserve close consideration. Setting boundaries functions in a similar vein. Boundaries communicate what you will and will not tolerate. When you speak up about your limits and remain firm, you're signaling that your well-being matters and that you have a framework for how you'll interact with the world. People who do not respect those boundaries often test them, either explicitly or through subtle manipulations. Learning to navigate these tests can be uncomfortable at first, but every time you hold fast to a boundary, you reinforce to yourself and to others that you have a strong sense of self-worth. This in turn raises your standing in their eyes, because respecting someone's boundary is, at the end of the day, a natural response to a clear, confident directive. In the sections ahead, we'll explore two vital steps. First, we'll delve deeply into why over-apologizing is more destructive than you might realize. Then we'll examine the mechanics and necessity of boundaries. When these two concepts combine, speaking without unnecessary guilt and honoring your own limits, you create a powerful synergy that demands respect. People start to see you differently, not as a timid presence, but as an individual who stands tall without belittling anyone else. And that last part is key. Asserting yourself isn't about overshadowing others or bullying them into silence. It's about balancing empathy, self-regard, and clear communication so that everyone's voice, including yours, can coexist in a respectful space. In many ways, these aren't just communication tools, they're life philosophies that can reshape relationships, careers, and even your own sense of personal fulfillment. Let's begin with the first major shift, curbing the reflex to say, "I'm sorry," for every minor inconvenience or imagined slight. On the surface, apologizing might seem polite. You may worry about stepping on someone's toes or appearing inconsiderate, so you automatically attach an apology to any action, request, or statement that might be even slightly imposing. Yet the reality is that over-apologizing dilutes the value of a genuine, "I'm sorry." It's akin to a currency that loses its worth the more you print it. When we repeatedly utter the phrase, for trivial matters, like entering a room a few minutes late or interjecting in a group discussion to share an idea, we're inadvertently telling people that our existence in that moment is a problem that needs excusing. Over time, it sends a clear message of self-minimization. "I'm sorry I'm here, and I'm sorry I took up your time." Imagine a scenario where a person arrives 2 minutes late to a meeting and spends the next minute rattling off apologies before even taking a seat. The audience, colleagues, superiors, or clients might initially respond with kindness, but subconsciously, they're also registering that this individual might be insecure, disorganized, or overly self-critical. After all, if you continuously apologize without a major reason, people begin to wonder if you truly believe in your own value in the workplace. Moreover, consider the paradox. The time spent apologizing can sometimes be longer than the actual delay itself, thereby inconveniencing everyone more than if you had simply taken your seat. By replacing a reflexive sorry with a simple expression of gratitude, "Thank you for waiting," you shift the energy of the exchange. Instead of focusing on the negative, "I messed up, please forgive me," you emphasize the positive, "I appreciate your patience." Beyond professional settings, this habit often extends into personal relationships. For instance, if someone bumps into you at a crowded event and your immediate response is, "I'm sorry," you're inadvertently accepting blame for something that wasn't your fault in the first place. It might seem harmless, but it reinforces the notion that you should be apologizing for simply existing in someone else's path. In a world where we struggle to feel seen and heard, consistent, needless apologies can chip away at your sense of self, leading you to believe you must constantly justify your presence. Over time, this can erode confidence, making you less likely to speak up or share your thoughts. That's not to say there's no place for an apology. If you've genuinely hurt someone or made a serious mistake, issuing a heartfelt "I'm sorry" is meaningful and responsible. The problem lies in doing it by default for every situation imaginable. One practical step toward breaking this cycle is to pause whenever you feel the words "I'm sorry" rising to your lips. Ask yourself, have I actually harmed or inconvenienced this person in a real way that merits an apology? If the answer is no, find an alternative phrase. Instead of "sorry for bothering you," say, "Do you have a moment to talk?" Or "Is now a good time?" These small linguistic changes signify a broader shift in perspective, from guilt and self-doubt to self-assurance and respect. You're no longer apologizing merely for existing, you're engaging on equal footing with those around you. My own awakening to the dangers of over-apologizing came during a period when I was juggling multiple projects at work and making every effort to be seen as a team player. I believed that by always apologizing for the slightest deviation, being late to a virtual meeting by 60 seconds, or interrupting a colleague to clarify a point, I would demonstrate politeness and humility. On one occasion, I entered a conference room, looked around at my coworkers, and immediately blurted out, "I'm so sorry I'm late," even though the meeting had only just begun and I was barely a minute past the start time. The person who was speaking paused, confused, and my manager gave me a gentle nod of understanding. After the meeting, she pulled me aside and said, "You know, it's okay if you're on time. People aren't going to hold it against you if you're 1 minute off schedule. You don't need to apologize every time you walk into a room." That comment was a revelation. It made me examine how often "I'm sorry" slipped out of my mouth in situations that were entirely normal. Later that day, I found myself saying "I'm sorry" when a coworker accidentally tapped my elbow as he walked past. The irony was glaring. Why was I apologizing for something someone else had done inadvertently? This epiphany prompted me to keep an apology journal, where I noted every instance I said "I'm sorry" over the course of a week. The results were astonishing. The number of times I apologized was easily triple what I would have anticipated, and most of those apologies were completely unnecessary. Realizing how deep the habit went, I made a conscious effort to replace apologies with statements of gratitude or neutrality. For instance, instead of saying, "I'm sorry for being late" when arriving 2 minutes past the hour, I'd say, "Thank you for waiting, I appreciate your patience." If someone interrupted me mid-sentence and I found myself wanting to say, "Oh, sorry, you go ahead," I'd pause and calmly continue my point, or politely say, "I'd like to finish this thought first, and then I'm happy to hear what you have to say." As I practiced this shift, something fascinating happened. I discovered that people treated me with more seriousness and attentiveness. My words seemed to carry greater weight, and I no longer came across as if I were perpetually on the defensive. In social settings, friends and acquaintances started to comment on my newfound confidence. "You seem more sure of yourself lately," one friend noted after I refrained from apologizing when someone else made a minor error in scheduling. By consistently avoiding knee-jerk apologies, I was effectively training myself to stop seeing every interaction as a potential misstep on my part. This didn't mean I became arrogant or dismissive. I still owned up when I truly made a mistake, but removing the noise of unnecessary apologies helped me stand taller, literally and metaphorically. I walked into rooms without the psychological burden of guilt, and, in turn, people began respecting me more readily. This small but powerful change can likewise transform your own life. Once you decide to stop trivializing yourself, you give others no reason to do so either. After addressing the "I'm sorry" habit, the next step toward securing genuine respect in conversation and in life is learning how to set and maintain healthy boundaries. Sometimes people view boundaries as walls that keep others out, but in truth, boundaries are more like signposts that communicate how you want to be treated. They're guidelines for respectful engagement. When you don't set boundaries, you can inadvertently invite disrespectful behavior because people have no clear sense of your limits. This can happen at work, in friendships, or even within your own family. Often it's not that others actively decide to disrespect you, it's that they've never been shown how you expect to be treated, and so they default to their own comfort or convenience. Boundaries come in many forms. You might decide not to respond to work emails after 7 p.m., so you can maintain a healthy work-life balance. You may choose not to discuss certain personal topics with casual acquaintances, or perhaps you insist on being addressed in a particular way, especially if you're in a position of leadership. By expressing your boundaries, you say, "This is who I am, and this is how I expect our interaction to proceed." Far from being antagonistic or harsh, it's an act of mutual respect. You're letting the other person know your rules of engagement while offering them a clearer way to relate to you without accidentally overstepping. But let's be real, establishing boundaries can be intimidating at first. You might fear losing relationships, job opportunities, or even peer approval. People who've become accustomed to having unlimited access to your time and energy may be surprised or upset when you start enforcing new rules. A close friend might guilt-trip you for not helping them move on your only free weekend of the month, or a coworker might roll their eyes when you clarify that you're unavailable for late-night calls. The temptation to backpedal is strong in these moments because it feels easier to maintain the status quo than to stand firm. Yet this is precisely when you must remind yourself why you chose to set the boundary in the first place. You likely did so because the alternative, unlimited demands on your time and resources, was leading to stress, burnout, or compromised self-esteem. One of the most liberating revelations about boundaries is that they also act as a filter for who belongs in your life and who doesn't. If you communicate a reasonable boundary, like, "Please don't call me after 10 p.m. unless it's an emergency," and someone repeatedly violates it, that's a strong indication they don't respect you or your well-being. While it can be painful to confront that reality, it empowers you to surround yourself with individuals who do appreciate your terms of engagement. Moreover, it's worth noting that boundary setting isn't about imposing your will on others. It's about safeguarding your own emotional, mental, and physical health. This is a form of self-care that ultimately teaches others to value you. When you respect your own limits, it signals that you won't allow them to be trampled on by anyone. To set boundaries effectively, clarity is crucial. Vague statements like, "I need more time to myself," can leave others guessing about what that actually means. Instead, specify the boundary in a direct yet polite way. "I need 2 hours of uninterrupted time each evening to focus on my personal projects. Please don't call or text me during that time unless it's urgent." This removes ambiguity and lets people know exactly what to expect. It also minimizes the chance of misunderstandings because you've laid out a clear guideline. If a friend or coworker pushes back, you can calmly reiterate your boundary without feeling the need to justify or over-explain. Over-explaining can sometimes be a sign of insecurity, implying you need their approval. You don't. Your boundary is your boundary, and it doesn't require validation from others to be legitimate. Of course, the real test comes not when you state your boundary, but when you have to uphold it. Suppose a colleague ignores your after-hours policy and sends a barrage of emails at 10:30 p.m., expecting an immediate response. In the morning, you have a choice. You can respond right away, effectively training them that you'll cave under pressure, or you can wait until your designated work hours and send a polite but firm message that reiterates when you are and aren't available. This might ruffle feathers initially, but it's a necessary step if you truly value your personal time. If you find that certain boundaries cause constant friction with specific individuals, consider whether those individuals are genuinely aligned with your well-being. Respect is a two-way street, and if they refuse to adapt, that's important information about the nature of that relationship, information you might not have discovered otherwise. I recall a time in my professional life when I was constantly staying late to finish last-minute tasks handed to me by a perpetually disorganized coworker. He would come to me at 5 p.m., our official closing time, and say, "I need your help with this urgent request. It's due tomorrow." Wanting to be a team player and worried about appearing unhelpful, I obliged again and again. Over time, my resentment grew. I was missing social events, personal workouts, and quality family time because I was stuck rewriting his last-minute presentations. Eventually, I mustered the courage to establish a boundary. I'm happy to assist if I'm given at least 24 hours notice. Otherwise, I can't guarantee I'll be available. As expected, he tested this rule a few times. I held firm, politely but consistently. After a short period of awkwardness, he learned to either manage his schedule better or handle the tight tasks himself. This shift didn't just restore my work-life balance. It also improved my sense of self-efficacy and confidence. By practicing boundary setting, you'll find that it simultaneously enhances your self-image and changes how people interact with you. When you become known as someone who respects their own limits and communicates clearly, people are more likely to meet you on those terms. The payoff is enormous. Not only do you preserve energy and protect your mental health, but you also establish a reputation as someone who is secure and self-respecting, an image that naturally commands respect from others. As we wrap up Part 1, remember that dropping needless apologies and setting boundaries are powerful tools that reinforce each other. By eliminating "I'm sorry" from situations where it's not warranted, you're already valuing yourself more highly. Following that up with explicit boundaries cements that valuation in the eyes of those around you. In this first section, we've zeroed in on two foundational elements of communication that significantly impact how others perceive us: the choice to stop apologizing needlessly and the decision to define clear boundaries. While these shifts may appear simple on the surface, they require a profound recalibration of your mindset. Overusing "I'm sorry" isn't merely a speech habit. It's often a reflection of deep-seated beliefs about your own worthiness or fear of displeasing others. By consciously replacing that autopilot apology with expressions of gratitude or direct statements of need, you broadcast to the world that you respect yourself enough not to frame your existence as an inconvenience. This new stance can feel unsettling at first, especially if you've spent years or even decades training yourself to lead with an apology in every social or professional exchange. Yet the payoff is immediate and transformative. People will start noticing that you're not someone who can be lightly dismissed. Likewise, setting boundaries is a potent act of self-congratulation. It says, in effect, My time, energy, and emotional space have worth, and I won't freely give them away. This doesn't mean you stop caring about others or turn into an unyielding individual who can't compromise. On the contrary, boundaries clarify your capacity to help or engage, making your contributions more genuine. When you do choose to offer your time, it's not out of guilt or perceived obligation, but from a place of genuine willingness. This authenticity is precisely what earns long-term respect. People might initially resist, particularly if they've become comfortable with you always accommodating their requests. But over time, most will adapt, and those who cannot or will not adapt reveal themselves as being more invested in your compliance than your well-being. As you move forward from part 1, it can be helpful to do a brief self-check. Notice how many times you say, "I'm sorry," in a day. Keep a mental or written tally. The results might surprise you. Then, pick a small boundary you'd like to enforce. Maybe it's reserving 30 minutes each evening for yourself without phone interruptions, or telling a colleague you won't be available for last-minute tasks after a certain hour. Observe how people react. You may face pushback, but that's part of the process. Over time, you'll witness the gradual shift in how people approach you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. You'll stand a bit taller, speak a bit clearer, and paradoxically, you might find yourself being far more respectful of others' boundaries and time as well. After all, respect flows in both directions. In the next part of this article, we'll delve into 2 more critical components of communicating for respect: mastering the art of pausing and using humor strategically rather than turning into the class clown. These techniques build on the solid foundation you've already laid by dropping needless apologies and setting firm boundaries. You'll learn how the space between words can be just as impactful, sometimes even more so, than the words themselves. And you'll discover how humor, when used wisely, can be a powerful connector, as opposed to a tool that undermines your credibility. For now, take a moment to reflect on any emotional or mental shifts you've felt while reading Part 1. Feel free to note your comments, questions, or personal experiences before moving on. Every transformative journey begins with self-awareness, and if you've made it this far, you're already well on your way. Welcome to Part 2. Having discussed the importance of letting go of unnecessary apologies and reinforcing your self-worth through firm boundaries, we now move into 2 equally transformative strategies: pausing and the use of humor. At first glance, these might seem less structured or less formal than boundary setting or apology elimination, but make no mistake, both can be just as impactful in determining how you're perceived. There's a natural tempo to effective communication, and knowing when to inject a moment of silence can be just as potent as choosing the exact words you'll speak. This is often referred to as the art of the pause. Properly timed pauses draw attention to your message, give listeners space to absorb your words, and project an aura of quiet confidence. It's a classic case of less is more. Sometimes fewer words, spaced strategically, command more authority than 1,000 sentences delivered in a rushed blur. The second topic, humor, can be thought of as a catalyst that, when used skillfully, forges connection and shared understanding. Yet humor is tricky because it's so deeply cultural, contextual, and personal. A well-placed joke or a witty remark can lighten tension, make complex ideas more digestible, and showcase your emotional intelligence. On the other hand, leaning too heavily on humor or employing it at the wrong time can undermine the gravity of your message, turning you into the perpetual jester rather than a respected equal. The risk is magnified if you consistently resort to self-deprecating humor or rely on jabs at others to get a laugh. In these cases, your credibility can falter, and you might inadvertently signal low self-esteem or a lack of empathy. In combining pauses and humor effectively, you strike a balance that captivates your audience. whether that's one person across the dinner table, a boardroom full of executives, or a social media audience you're addressing online. Think of your communication style as a recipe. Too much of one ingredient, like rapid-fire talking, makes the entire dish overwhelming, while complete absence of another, like levity, could make your discourse feel dry or overly stern. You want to harmonize the flavors so that your listeners not only grasp your point but enjoy the experience of hearing you. This is especially relevant in professional settings where tension can run high. Humor can ease that tension, and a pause can command a hush of anticipation, both of which lend weight to what you have to say. As we dive in, reflect on the times you've experienced the captivating power of silence or the unifying magic of laughter. Think of presenters who hold your attention not because they bombard you with words, but because they pace themselves, allowing each point to sink in. Recall the friend who cracks just the right joke at just the right moment, changing a potentially awkward or dreary scenario into one that's memorable and uplifting. In this part, we'll explore how you can cultivate these two skills, pausing and humor, in a way that feels authentic to you. After all, respect thrives not on imitation or superficial trickery, but on genuine self-expression, grounded in confidence and empathy. Pausing may initially seem counterintuitive in a culture that prizes speed, decisiveness, and constant action. We're often encouraged to respond immediately, to fill every silence with commentary, or to hustle for attention by speaking louder and faster than everyone else in the room. Yet the surprising reality is that a well-placed pause can command more respect than a barrage of words. When you pause, you do more than merely stop talking. You create a moment of mental and emotional space that invites others to truly hear what you've said. It's like a breath in music. Those brief intervals between notes can heighten the listener's appreciation of the melody. One reason pausing is so powerful is that it projects confidence. Imagine you're pitching a business idea to potential investors. You lay out your main concept, then intentionally pause for a couple of seconds. During that silence, the investors are processing your words. The unspoken message you convey is, "I trust that what I've just said has enough merit to stand on its own." It also shows that you aren't afraid of letting your words linger, suggesting you believe in their value. Conversely, if you rush into over-explaining or barrage people with supplementary points, it may appear you're trying to compensate for a lack of confidence in your core message. Confidence in communication isn't about filling every second, it's about choosing the right words and trusting that those words can resonate without incessant support. Furthermore, pausing fosters genuine engagement. In conversation, a pause can act as a signal to others that it's their turn to speak or ask questions. This is particularly helpful in group settings or one-on-one interactions where dialogue is intended to be a two-way street. If you never pause, you might be perceived as monopolizing the conversation or not valuing other perspectives. By allowing silences, you demonstrate respect for the collective process of communication. People feel more comfortable contributing when they sense you're not just waiting to steamroll over them with more words. However, how you pause also matters. There's a difference between a purposeful pause and an awkward one. A purposeful pause is deliberate, timed to give weight to a statement or to invite feedback. You maintain a confident posture, steady eye contact where appropriate, and a calm demeanor. An awkward pause often happens by accident when you lose your train of thought or feel uncertain. The key is intentionality. You should be aware of when you're pausing and why. If you find yourself stumbling into silences, practice delivering short statements, then consciously pausing. You might do this in low-stakes environments first, like casual conversations with friends, so you can become comfortable with letting your words hang for a moment before continuing. In today's hyper-accelerated world, developing comfort with silence can feel as though you're going against the grain. but that's precisely why it stands out. People are used to nonstop chatter, social media scrolls, and rapid-fire debates. When you slow the pace, you allow for reflection and deeper engagement. The pause, therefore, becomes a powerful tool in your communication arsenal, one that can shift you from being just another voice in the din to someone whose words demand and command attention. My personal journey toward embracing pauses was initially fraught with discomfort. I used to believe that if I wasn't continuously talking, I'd lose my audience's attention or appear unprepared. During presentations at work, I'd rush from point to point, rarely taking a breath. I assumed this would showcase enthusiasm and competence, but the real outcome was confusion among my listeners. They couldn't keep track of my ideas because I never gave them a moment to digest anything. One day, after a particularly fast-paced speech, my manager pulled me aside and said, "You've got good material, but you're not giving anyone time to actually process it. Build in some space." The advice was jarring, but it triggered a pivotal change. I started watching effective public speakers and noticed a shared trait. Whether they were delivering a keynote address or a stand-up comedy routine, they all knew how to pause. Some paused for a dramatic effect, others to cue laughter, and some to invite the audience's internal reflection. The common denominator was that the pause felt intentional, never accidental. So I began incorporating pauses in my own mini-tests, like in team meetings of 5 or 6 people. I'd present an idea in a concise statement and then deliberately stop for a couple of seconds, resisting the urge to fill the silence. The transformation was astonishing. People leaned in, sometimes nodded or wrote notes, and then either asked follow-up questions or expressed their agreement. By giving them time to think, I was effectively increasing the value of my words. Still, pausing can be a double-edged sword if misunderstood. There's a risk that a pause might be interpreted as uncertainty if your body language or tone of voice betrays nervousness. For example, if you're fidgeting, looking away, or stammering, a pause might come across as you forgetting what to say next. To avoid that, practice mindful nonverbal cues. Stand or sit up straight, maintain eye contact, and project calmness. As you finish your statement and enter the pause, keep your facial expression neutral or lightly confident, as if you expect people to be contemplating your words. This sets a clear context that your pause is part of the plan, not a glitch in it. Another pitfall is overusing pauses, which can disrupt the flow of conversation. While strategic pausing is powerful, pausing every other sentence can feel unnatural or even manipulative, leading people to think you're drawing things out for effect rather than clarity. The key is moderation. Pause intentionally to emphasize key points or to open the floor to others, but don't turn your entire speech into an erratic series of halts. Balance is essential. Just as a piece of music needs a mix of notes and rests, your speech benefits from a similar interplay of spoken words and short, meaningful silences. Embracing pauses also involves understanding your audience. Some settings, like a high-pressure negotiation, may benefit from slightly longer pauses to underscore each offer or counteroffer. In other, more casual settings, like a friendly debate over dinner, you might keep your pauses shorter to maintain a lively back and forth. Being adaptable ensures that your use of silence feels organic rather than contrived. With some trial and error, you'll find that the art of pausing can become second nature, opening the door for deeper connections and a reputation as a speaker who respects both the power of words and the necessity of space between them. Humor is often described as a social lubricant, a way to relieve tension or bridge gaps in otherwise stiff or uncomfortable situations. Indeed, sharing a well-timed laugh can break the ice, show you're approachable, and create a sense of camaraderie. Research even suggests that humor, when used appropriately, can make you appear more intelligent and personable. However, humor is not a free pass to overshadow serious issues or to reduce your credibility by presenting yourself as the perpetual jester. It's a subtle art, one that requires a good read of the room and an understanding of the context you're in. Employ it wisely and you'll draw people in. Overdo it or do it poorly, and you risk losing the respect you're trying so hard to earn. A classic pitfall is self-deprecating humor. A sprinkling of it can show you're humble, aware of your shortcomings, or simply confident enough to laugh at yourself. But if taken too far, people might start to believe your negative remarks or see you as someone who doesn't take themselves seriously. There's a difference between saying, "I'm not the best at karaoke, but I'll try," and constantly calling yourself incompetent, clumsy, or the office screw-up. If you repeatedly describe yourself in demeaning ways, you can't be surprised if others start to echo that sentiment. After all, you're laying the groundwork for how they should view you. This is where self-awareness plays a critical role. Ask yourself, am I making this joke because I want to connect with people, or am I using it to mask my insecurities? Another issue arises when humor crosses into the territory of insulting or belittling others. Sarcasm can be hilarious among friends who share a similar wavelength, but in mixed company or professional environments, it can be dangerous. You never know who might take offense or who might see it as a sign of arrogance or ill intent. Dark humor likewise has a time and place, and that place is generally not a work meeting or a casual get-together where participants have varying comfort levels. Public figures have seen their reputations crumble overnight for off-the-cuff jokes that were taken badly by their audience. The lesson here is that humor carries risk. The more controversial or edgy the joke, the higher the risk. If your aim is to garner respect, be strategic about when to unleash that biting wit, or, in some cases, hold it back entirely. Moreover, leaning too heavily on humor can make you look like you're avoiding serious discussions. If you crack jokes whenever the conversation becomes challenging, you may come across as someone who can't handle depth or confrontation. Colleagues or friends might start excluding you from important matters because they assume you won't engage in a meaningful way. In effect, you become a clown rather than a credible contributor. That doesn't mean there's no room for a light-hearted quip during a serious meeting, but it should serve the conversation, not derail it. The best humor uplifts the atmosphere while still respecting the gravity of the moment. Ultimately, the key to using humor effectively is respect. Respect for yourself, respect for the person or people you're addressing, and respect for the context you're in. Comedy isn't universal. What's funny to one group may be offensive to another. By being aware of these nuances, you demonstrate emotional intelligence, a trait that garners respect in its own right. Combine this awareness with authenticity, only making jokes that feel natural to you, and you'll find that humor can be a force multiplier for the points you're trying to convey. During one of my early career roles, I prided myself on being the funny one in team meetings. I'd interject witty remarks whenever the conversation grew too dry, and for a while it felt like a winning strategy. My teammates would chuckle, and the tension in the room would often dissipate. However, I noticed over time that certain people began to tune me out when the discussion turned serious. They'd share complex problems or express concerns, and if I'd tried to contribute non-humorous suggestions, they'd look past me to someone else. It was as if I'd accidentally pigeonholed myself into the role of the comedic relief rather than a colleague whose viewpoints on serious matters deserved attention. It was a sobering realization. I had become the clown rather than a fully respected member of the team. Recognizing this pattern, I made a conscious effort to scale back the jokes. Rather than quipping at every lull, I waited until there was a clear opportunity, maybe a tense moment that needed a touch of levity, or a break in the meeting when everyone's energy was waning. When I did make a humorous remark, I kept it brief and respectful of the situation. Over time, my colleagues began to see me as someone with a more balanced approach, capable of injecting humor but also of contributing thoughtful insights when the stakes were high. The respect I regained was palpable. People solicited my opinions more frequently and seemed more open to hearing them. I learned that humor can be an asset, but only if it's wielded with discretion and empathy. Self-deprecating humor presented another learning curve. In an attempt to appear modest, I'd often make fun of my own mistakes or perceived flaws. For instance, if I made a small error on a spreadsheet, I'd say, "Well, you know me, I'm terrible at math anyway." I thought it made me relatable, but I soon discovered that my manager began assigning me fewer tasks involving complex calculations. While that might sound like a perk, it also limited my professional development. She'd never have given me a chance to improve my analytical skills if she assumed I was permanently bad at math. Once I realized that my throwaway jokes were reinforcing a negative narrative about my skill set, I made a conscious choice to present myself as a person eager to learn instead of someone already content with a negative label. There's a delicate balance here. By all means, it can be endearing to laugh at your own foibles now and then, but if the self-deprecation becomes a defining characteristic of your humor, it can undermine your credibility. Similarly, if you rely on poking fun at others, be certain they're on board and that the context is appropriate. A joking jab can feel like camaraderie among friends who share a long history, but it's a different story when dealing with coworkers or acquaintances who might not appreciate your sense of humor or might not know you well enough to realize it's all in jest. Essentially, humor should enhance the dialogue and foster connection, not distract from the substance of what you have to say or diminish how people perceive your capabilities. Now that we've explored the twin pillars of pausing and humor, you may wonder how to integrate them seamlessly into your everyday communication. The first step is awareness. Start by observing your current habits. Do you talk at a mile a minute without stopping to breathe or gauge reactions? Do you crack jokes as a reflex whenever conversation becomes tense or dull? Track these tendencies in real time, much like you would track your budget or dietary habits. Once you identify a pattern, you can make strategic adjustments. For instance, if you notice you rarely pause during presentations, practice building in natural breaks in your next rehearsal. If you realize you're making 4 or 5 jokes per meeting, challenge yourself to cut that number in half and focus on clarity instead. The second step involves experimentation. Pausing effectively can feel uncomfortable at first. Our social conditioning makes us fear silence. But try it in low-stakes environments, like chatting with a friend about a movie. Make a concise statement about the film's theme, then pause for 2 or 3 seconds, maintaining eye contact or a calm posture. Notice how your friend responds. You'll likely see that they feel invited to reflect on what you've said. Similarly, if you're aiming to refine your humor, begin by calibrating the type of jokes you make. If self-deprecation is your default, limit yourself to 1 such joke per conversation and balance it with constructive or positive remarks about yourself. If teasing others is your go-to method, consider more light-hearted observations that don't risk humiliating anyone. Basically, use humor to unite, not divide. Over time, you'll learn to read the room better. In professional settings, there may be unspoken norms about how much levity is acceptable. Some work cultures thrive on playful banter, while others expect a more buttoned-up approach. Pay attention to the reactions of your peers or supervisors. If they laugh genuinely and join in the humor, that's a sign you're striking the right chord. If they remain stone-faced or shift uncomfortably, it's time to dial it back. The same principle applies to pauses. Watch your audience's body language. Are they leaning in, appearing engaged? Or do they look confused as if the silence is too drawn out? Fine-tuning your approach in real time is part of the artistry of communication. Lastly, remember that both these techniques should serve your larger goal, to convey your ideas effectively and earn genuine respect. Pausing creates mental space for your listeners and underscores the importance of what you're saying. Humor, when used wisely, eases tension and showcases your emotional intelligence. Combined with the strategies from Part 1, minimizing unwarranted apologies and establishing boundaries, you'll cultivate a communication style that's at once assertive, empathetic, and disarmingly authentic. Far from being a set of mechanical rules, these techniques become second nature, reflecting a deeper shift toward honoring your own voice and the dignity of those around you. As we conclude Part 2, it's worth reiterating that speaking in a way that commands respect isn't about showmanship or trickery, it's about resonance. Every pause you take and every well-placed joke you tell should arise from a genuine place. When you pause, you're not just inserting silence for dramatic flair, you're granting everyone, including yourself, the grace to process and engage thoughtfully. When you use humor, you're not trying to mask insecurities or demean others. You're offering a moment of lightness that builds bridges and fosters a sense of shared humanity. These strategies work best when they align with your authentic self rather than being forced performances. If you've come this far, you've already familiarized yourself with 4 major communication upgrades: letting go of needless apologies, setting and enforcing boundaries, harnessing the power of well-timed pauses, and deploying humor in a way that reinforces rather than undermines your credibility. Like any meaningful change, these shifts take time and introspection. You might stumble or revert to old habits under stress. That's normal. Growth is rarely linear, and every slip-up is an opportunity to understand your triggers and refine your approach. Looking ahead to Part 3, we'll cover 2 final points to round out your transformative journey: dropping the gossip and knowing when to stop talking altogether. While these may sound straightforward, each one has its own layers of complexity. Gossip can be an insidious trap, offering momentary social bonding at the expense of trust and long-term respect, and the ability to sense the right moment to end a conversation, and how to exit it gracefully, can mean the difference between someone valuing your contributions or perceiving you as someone who overstays their welcome. Take a moment now to reflect on the role of pauses and humor in your daily life. Are there conversations or environments where you tend to be more anxious and thus fill every silence? Do you rely on jokes to navigate tension or elevate your social standing? Share any insights or difficulties in the comments section, because articulating them can help you become more mindful. Once you're ready, move on to the final installment, where we'll address the nuances of steering clear of destructive chatter and the power of ending your statements at just the right moment. By the end of this 3-part journey, you'll have a robust toolkit that not only enhances how you speak, but also enriches your relationships and self-perception. You've now reached the final stage of our deep dive into speaking, so people can't help but respect you. Throughout Parts 1 and 2, we explored how changing our approach to apologies, boundaries, pauses, and humor can significantly elevate the way we're perceived by those around us. Now we'll look at 2 final but crucial pieces of the puzzle: cutting out gossip from our conversations and knowing the precise moment to wrap up our points, also known as recognizing when to stop talking. These aren't just random communication tips, they're intimately linked to the philosophy of self-respect and the mutual respect we create with others. In a world that sometimes feels saturated with noise, negativity, and endless chatter, these strategies stand out as hallmarks of a person who is both trustworthy and compelling. First, let's address gossip. People often indulge in gossip to feel connected to others or to gain social leverage, but the short-term benefits come with a hefty long-term price. When you gossip, you're broadcasting more about your own character than anything else. It's a signal to those listening that you might be willing to disclose or twist details about them in the future. This naturally erodes trust. Even if listeners are entertained momentarily, they'll likely walk away questioning your reliability. Over time, you develop a reputation as someone who thrives on or perpetuates negativity, which can be incredibly hard to shake. Gossip doesn't just damage the person you're talking about, it also damages you by shaping how others perceive your sense of integrity. The second point, knowing when to stop talking, ties in closely with the art of pausing. While pausing is about inserting strategic silences within your speech, stopping takes it one step further. It's the deliberate choice to end your contribution rather than belabor a point or circle back with redundant explanations. Sometimes we talk more than necessary because we're uncertain that our listeners grasped what we meant, or we feel an unspoken pressure to prove our expertise. The paradox is that over-explaining can make people question your confidence, not reinforce it. By learning to conclude your statements cleanly and succinctly, you leave people with a strong final impression, one that often invites them to ask for more or reflect on what you said, rather than tuning you out. In Part 3, we'll delve into both of these aspects in detail. We'll unpack the psychology behind why we gossip, the damage it causes, and effective ways to remove that impulse from your day-to-day interactions. Then we'll address why brevity can be your secret weapon in communication, especially in professional or formal settings where every extra minute you talk could cost you credibility. By integrating these final pieces into the framework we've already established, you'll round out your communication skills in a way that not only fosters respect, but also nurtures deeper, more genuine connections. After all, respect is as much about what you don't say as it is about what you do. Let's turn our attention to the subject of gossip. Gossip is often described as social currency, something that temporarily buys you a ticket into a conversation or group dynamic. You might say something like, "Did you hear what happened with so-and-so?" And for a fleeting moment you share a conspiratorial bond with your listener. Yet like any currency, gossip comes with interest and hidden fees. Specifically, it diminishes trust and compromises your integrity. Even if people seem eager to listen to your stories, on a deeper level, they're also learning that you could reveal or distort information about them if the situation arises. Why do we gossip in the first place? There are several reasons. Sometimes it's out of boredom, we crave entertainment, and other people's lives can feel more exciting than our own. Other times it's a misguided way to bond, a quick method to find common ground by collectively talking about someone else. In more problematic scenarios, gossip is used to elevate oneself by tearing others down, suggesting that I'm better informed or I wouldn't make that mistake. Whichever the motivation, the consequence is the same. Gossip erodes the very trust it momentarily seems to build. What begins as an entertaining anecdote or a juicy revelation can quickly spiral into a game of broken telephone, warping truths and potentially harming reputations. Moreover, gossip often signals insecurity. We sometimes criticize others behind their backs to deflect attention from our own perceived flaws. In doing so, we inadvertently say to the world, "Look how flawed they are. Don't focus on me." This tactic might offer a small respite from self-scrutiny, but it also drains away genuine respect from those who witness it. People who consistently gossip become known not as charismatic storytellers, but as unreliable narrators who handle relationships and personal information carelessly. Over time, friends and colleagues learn to keep a safe distance, worried that anything they confide will be turned into the next sensational tidbit. One crucial aspect of dropping the gossip habit is recognizing the difference between sharing genuine concerns and merely passing along rumors or negative commentary. There's a fine line between approaching a mentor to discuss a serious issue like unethical workplace behavior or a friend's well-being, and simply venting or speculating about someone's personal matters. If you're unsure whether something counts as gossip, ask yourself, would I say this if the person were standing right next to me? Or Am I seeking a constructive solution, or am I just fanning flames? If the answer is the latter, consider staying silent or redirecting the conversation towards something more productive. Ultimately, removing gossip from your vocabulary is about doing yourself a favor. When you hold back from idle chatter and rumor spreading, you become a person who fosters trust. Your words carry more weight because people sense you have discretion and integrity. Sure, you may lose out on some ephemeral thrills, but you gain something far more valuable: respect that stands the test of time. As with apologizing unnecessarily, gossip is often a reflex. Breaking free from it requires conscious effort. Perhaps even removing yourself from environments or friend circles where gossip is the main pastime. But once you manage it, you'll notice a shift in how people relate to you. They'll see you as reliable, decent, and considerate, qualities that speak volumes about your character. My personal battle with gossip reached a turning point when I realized how quickly an offhand comment could escalate into a full-blown rumor mill. In one instance, I casually mentioned to a coworker that a friend of mine, also a colleague, seemed a bit stressed lately. It was a straightforward observation, not inherently malicious. But my coworker passed the comment along in a more dramatic form, implying that the friend was on the verge of quitting or having a breakdown. By the end of the week, people were whispering about why so-and-so was so unhappy at work and whether layoffs were looming. When my friend heard these rumors, I felt immediate regret. Even though my initial remark was mild, it had fueled a much larger narrative, one that disrupted the office environment and put my friend in an uncomfortable spotlight. From that experience, I learned a valuable lesson. Seemingly harmless remarks can become dangerous ammunition in the wrong hands. This illuminated the power of silence and discretion. Now, if I notice someone looking stressed, I refrain from making that observation public. Instead, I might reach out directly to that person. "Hey, I noticed you seem a bit overwhelmed. Is everything okay?" By shifting my approach from passing commentary to direct support, I maintain respect for that person's privacy and also nurture a healthier work environment. It's a win-win. They know I care, and I'm not inadvertently contributing to rumor circulation. Another effective strategy for avoiding gossip is learning how to pivot the conversation. When you're stuck in a group and someone starts talking negatively about a mutual acquaintance or coworker, you can gently steer the topic away by adding a neutral or positive comment, or by introducing a new subject altogether. For instance, if the conversation becomes fixated on a colleague's personal life choices, you might say, "Actually, I heard they just completed an advanced certification for work. Maybe that's been taking a lot of their time." This kind of reframing not only changes the tone, but also signals that you aren't interested in tearing the person down. If that doesn't work, you can remove yourself from the discussion. It might feel awkward, but sometimes preserving integrity is worth a brief moment of discomfort. Of course, stopping gossip doesn't mean ignoring genuine problems or concerns that might affect someone's well-being or workplace performance. If you believe someone is in trouble or a situation needs addressing, speak to them directly or escalate the issue through appropriate channels. The key is intent. Are you trying to help resolve a problem, or are you seeking a juicy story to share? By keeping your focus on constructive action, you'll naturally distance yourself from gossip-driven behaviors. In the end, every piece of gossip you don't spread is a step toward building a solid reputation and more trustworthy relationships. People will notice that you're not the type to indulge in idle speculation or malicious talk. Over time, they'll confide in you more, seek your counsel, and look up to you as someone who handles information with care, a sure path to earning deeper respect. The sixth and final principle in our quest to speak in a way that commands respect is learning to recognize the exact moment your message has landed and then stopping. This might sound like common sense, But many of us struggle with the urge to over-communicate. Perhaps we've been told all our lives to be thorough, or maybe we're driven by a fear that people won't fully grasp our point unless we present it from every angle. Ironically, over-explaining can weaken your argument. Imagine someone repeating themselves over and over in a conversation. Your initial interest probably turns to impatience or even annoyance. Conversely, making a point succinctly and then trusting your audience to absorb it leaves a stronger impression. Why does over-talking happen so frequently? In many cases, it stems from insecurity. You may doubt your own credibility or worry that your listener isn't paying attention, so you bombard them with reiterations or additional justifications, hoping to force comprehension. Unfortunately, this can have the opposite effect. Rather than persuading your audience, you risk overwhelming or frustrating them. In a business setting, for instance, you might pitch a brilliant idea but then derail its impact by adding excessive tangents or disclaimers. After a certain point, people tune out, and the clarity of your original insight gets lost in the noise. Recognizing the right stopping point involves tuning in to verbal and nonverbal cues from your audience. Are they nodding along, making eye contact, and offering affirmations like, "Yes, that makes sense," or do they appear fidgety and distracted, glancing at their phones or looking away? Sometimes they may actively say, "I understand," or "That's clear." Take these signs at face value. If they indicate comprehension or agreement, you're likely safe to conclude. When you stop talking at the right time, you project confidence in your idea and respect for your listener's intelligence. You also invite them to respond, turning a monologue into a dialogue. It's equally important to trust your own instincts. If you've stated your case clearly, ask yourself, will additional words clarify or just clutter what I've said? If the answer is clutter, it might be time to pause and let the silence do the heavy lifting. Sometimes, the most impactful statement is the one left unsaid, because it allows the listener to reflect and generate questions. By ending on a strong note rather than diluting your message with superfluous details, you demonstrate faith in both yourself and your audience. Knowing when to stop talking also means respecting other people's time. If you're in a meeting, running over your allotted presentation window might inconvenience others and diminish the respect they have for you. If you're at a social gathering and dominate the conversation, people may avoid engaging with you again. The hallmark of a great communicator is the ability not just to speak compellingly, but to listen and to leave space for others to contribute. When you sense you've said enough, close out your point with concise confidence. You'd be surprised at how ending too soon can actually spark more engagement than ending too late. I once attended a conference where one of the presenters had a riveting opening. She offered a concise, data-driven overview of a new market strategy. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, seemingly ready to ask questions and engage in discussion. But rather than allowing that interaction to unfold naturally, the speaker kept talking, pulling up slide after slide of tangential data. As she went on, I noticed shoulders slumping and people looking at their watches. By the time she finally concluded, much of her earlier impact had faded. People were too weary from the bombardment of extra details to comment on her main points, which had been quite promising. She had effectively talked herself out of making a memorable impression. The lesson was clear. Too much elaboration can overshadow your strongest points. To avoid this pitfall, one technique is to outline the core idea you wish to communicate in any given interaction, a meeting, a phone call, or even a casual conversation. Imagine it as the thesis statement of an essay. Stick closely to that thesis, and any supporting points should directly reinforce it. Once you sense you've made the point in a clear and compelling way, it's time to consider wrapping up. A good rule of thumb is to end with a summarizing statement, something like, "Those are the key takeaways I wanted to share. I'm open to any questions or thoughts you might have." This invites participation without drowning your audience in repetitive content. Another practical approach is to listen actively to the conversation flow. If you find yourself interrupting or cutting others off, it's a red flag that you might be over-talking. Similarly, if you realize you're repeating yourself, consider whether new information is being added or if you're simply rephrasing the same message. If it's the latter, it might be time to pause and ask for the listener's feedback instead. A simple question such as, "Does that make sense?" or "What's your perspective on this?" not only breaks your speaking streak, but also encourages a more collaborative discussion. For informal social settings, being mindful of your talk-to-listen ratio is a good practice. Aim for a balance, ensuring that others have ample space to share their stories or insights. It may be helpful to remember that being a respectful and attentive listener often earns more rapport than being the person with the most to say. People generally appreciate those who can give them the spotlight, even briefly. If you let others speak and genuinely pay attention, they're more likely to reciprocate and respect your words when it's your turn. Finally, don't confuse brevity with a lack of depth or substance. Many of the world's greatest speeches are famous for their conciseness, not their length. The Gettysburg Address, for example, is barely over 2 minutes long, yet it stands as one of the most powerful orations in history. The ability to distill complex ideas into succinct, potent statements is a skill worth cultivating, one that leaves your audience wanting to hear more from you instead of hoping you'll wrap up. In short, finishing strong and finishing sooner rather than later can work wonders for how your message is received. Now that we've covered all 6 key strategies, ditching the unnecessary "I'm sorry," setting firm boundaries, mastering the art of the pause, using humor judiciously, eliminating gossip, and knowing when to stop talking, it's time to take a step back and see how these pieces fit together into a cohesive communication philosophy. At the heart of all these points is one central theme: respect. Not just respect from others, but respect for yourself. Each technique in its own way signals to the world that you value your words, your time, and your integrity. When you stop apologizing for simply existing or offering an opinion, you demonstrate that you see your presence as valid. When you set boundaries, you reinforce that your well-being matters. When you pause deliberately, you show confidence in your ideas. When you use humor thoughtfully, you exhibit emotional intelligence. When you avoid gossip, you reveal discretion and trustworthiness. And when you know how to conclude your thoughts, you radiate clarity and poise. Implementing these shifts won't necessarily happen overnight. Each one might require practice, mindfulness, and a willingness to face some initial discomfort. You may catch yourself uttering "I'm sorry" out of habit, or you might slip into gossip before realizing you've gone too far. The journey is about becoming more conscious of your communication patterns and gradually aligning them with the values you wish to uphold. Along the way, you'll likely stumble, everyone does, but each stumble is also an opportunity to learn and refine your approach. Consider also how these strategies interact in practical scenarios. If you're in a team meeting, you might first be mindful of not apologizing for raising a new idea, point 1. Then you might set a boundary around how long you're willing to stay to finish a project, point 2. During your presentation, you pause at key moments to let your points sink in, point 3, and maybe sprinkle in a light, relevant joke to keep the mood engaging, point 4. If someone tries to pull you aside afterward to gossip about another colleague, you politely pivot or express concern directly rather than fueling rumors, point 5. Finally, when you sense your audience has heard enough, you succinctly wrap up your remarks, resisting the urge to over-elaborate, point 6. This synergy of respectful communication habits not only makes you more compelling, but also encourages a healthier, more positive atmosphere for everyone involved. Beyond professional settings, these principles apply equally to personal relationships. Whether you're negotiating household chores with a partner, resolving a conflict with a friend, or even engaging in a spirited debate at a family gathering, these principles serve to elevate the conversation. They remind you to treat both yourself and others with dignity, to listen as well as speak, and to contribute to dialogues that foster understanding rather than generate tension. Over time, people come to recognize you as an individual who communicates with authenticity, calm authority, and genuine consideration for those you engage with. As we conclude this extended exploration of how to speak in ways that inherently command respect, it's important to remember that the ultimate goal isn't to manipulate or coerce people into seeing you in a certain light. Instead, the goal is to become the version of yourself who naturally commands respect, because you are confident, empathetic, and mindful of the power of words. By adjusting your communication style, dropping unnecessary apologies, setting boundaries, strategically using silence, employing humor with discretion, refusing to indulge in harmful gossip, and knowing when to conclude, you evolve into a speaker whose presence is felt every time you open your mouth. In this sense, the transformation is as much internal as it is external. You learn to trust your own voice, appreciate the value of others, and steer conversations in a direction that uplifts rather than degrades. Now, having read through parts 1, 2, and 3, take stock of the insights that resonated most with you. Perhaps you realized you apologize compulsively or have a habit of self-deprecating humor that undermines your credibility. Maybe you saw yourself in the examples of boundaryless living or recognized how often you talk past the point of clarity. Identify 1 or 2 strategies to focus on initially and commit to practicing them over the next few weeks. Change tends to be more sustainable when approached incrementally. When you see tangible progress in one area, like reducing your "I'm sorry" habit, you'll be inspired to tackle the others with greater enthusiasm. If you find yourself challenged by any step, consider enlisting help. Talk to a friend or mentor about your communication goals and ask them to gently point out when you slip into old habits. Sometimes an outside perspective can accelerate growth by making you aware of tics or tendencies you wouldn't notice on your own. Journaling or recording yourself in practice conversations can also be enlightening. The key is consistent self-reflection. Keep questioning whether your words and your silences are in service of the kind of respectful communication you want to embody. Finally, don't underestimate the ripple effect of your transformation. By modeling respectful communication, you encourage those around you, friends, family, coworkers, to engage more thoughtfully as well. People often mirror the behaviors they see, and by speaking with clarity and empathy, you pave the way for healthier dynamics in every social circle you touch. Over time, the impact goes beyond personal gain. It contributes to a culture where dialogue is constructive, boundaries are honored, humor is unifying, and trust is preserved. Thank you for taking this journey through all 3 parts. Your willingness to examine and refine your communication style is already a testament to the respect you have for yourself and others. As you put these strategies into action, remember that the most powerful conversations aren't necessarily the loudest or the longest. They're the ones rooted in genuine understanding and mutual respect. Now it's your turn to apply these insights in real-life scenarios, observe the shifts, and continue evolving as a communicator who not only speaks, but also lives with respect at the core. Personally, adopting these communication secrets has dramatically improved every aspect of my life, from career success to deeper connections with loved ones. Removing needless apologies and gossip, mastering timely humor, and knowing precisely when to pause or wrap up a point have made my interactions richer, more authentic, and undeniably more impactful. But now I want to hear from you. Which of these tips resonates most with your experiences? Which one are you eager to put into practice first? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely love engaging with you all. Remember, by sharing your insights, you're helping others grow too. Thanks for watching, and make sure you've hit subscribe for more inspiring and relatable content coming your way soon.